Hey there guys, this is Mr. Benanti. We are going to look at our lesson 2, which deals with percents and fractions. We're going to continue focusing on that essential question, and that is, when is it better to use a fraction, a decimal, or a percent? So let's go ahead and dive into this real world link and see what we've got. Sports. Students were asked to choose their favorite sport to play. Number 1. For each sport, shade a 10 by 10 grid that represents the number of students out of 100 that chose the sport. Well, if we look at the first sport, which is basketball, it says that 3 out of 10, 3 out of 20. So 3 out of 20 is the number that we're trying to represent in this shaded section. First off, we have to understand how much this grid is worth. So if we take our X, which is this way, and our Y, which is this way, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we know that it's probably going to be out of 100 as it instructed, but we want to double check to be 100% sure. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 by 10 would be 100. So we need to represent 3 out of 20. Well, first we have to see how many sections of 20 we can get for 100. You can kind of see here, it's a little hard to tell from this darkened line here. So if we took 2 by 10, that would give us 20 boxes. So that's how many we would be out of 100, but we want to get out of 20 right here. So let's break it up into 20 boxes. So we can have a section here, 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 and here. So we can have 5 sections of 20. So in order to make this work for out of 20, we have to shade in 3, 1, 2, 3, per 20. So there's 1, 2. We come over to this next section, and then next, and then the last. So now we have shown 3 out of 20, but it said the number of students out of 100 that chose the sport. So by doing 3 out of 20 once, then multiplying it by 5 to get a total of 100, we've now shown how many out of 100 and also 20. So we take 3 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which will give us 15 out of 100. Let's go ahead and move on to this one. This one says 3 out of 25. Well, this one will be a little easier to break down. We can just take 5 by 5 boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can divide it right here and right here. And we'll just do 3 out of 25. Here, I'll make my little mark here so that you guys can see I'm dividing it in half, both along the x-axis and the y-axis. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3. Simple as that so far. Now this one, we do the same thing as we did on the first one since it's out of 20. But instead we only have to fill out 1. So this is 1 out of 20, out of this spot right here. I had to split it up. So again, an x of 2 and a y of 10 would give us out of 20. Do it again here, 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 and here. So now we have filled out 1 out of 20 for every section of 20 that we have, which again, if we multiply by 5, that will give us 100. And then 5 times 1 is 5. So 5 out of 100. Good. Let's move on to this one. Now this one says 9 out of 100. So we're not going to break this down any further. We're going to use our full grid, which is 100. And we just need to shade 9. Well, I know one row is 10, or one column, so I'll just fill in all of them, but 1. Just like that. Let's take a look here. What fraction with a denominator of 100 represents the number of students who chose each sport? Well, in order to figure that out, we're going to have to use the content we used from up here and convert everything out of 100. So let's make sure we do that right. So on the first one, basketball, which was 3 out of 20, 3 out of 20, we need to get our denominator to 100. Now to do that, I took 20 times 5. So whatever I do the denominator, I have to also do to the numerator. So 3 times 5, as we talked about, is, of course, 15. Now, let's take a look at football. Football was 3 out of 25. Now, I'm not multiplying by 5 anymore, I'm multiplying by 4. I have to take 25 times 4 in order to get it to 100. So I did the denominator, 25 times 4. Then I take 3 times 4, which was for football, as you can see here, football. So 3 times 4 is, of course, 12. Let's move on. Gymnastics. We had 1 out of 20, but again, we got to convert it. Well, like the one we did here, we took 20 times 5, which got us 100, which we'll do again. And we already did the work for us already. And we took 5 times 1, which is, of course, 5. So 5 out of 100. Now let's look at swimming. Do we really need to do anything to this one if we're making it out of 100? No. So this one stays the same. Let's go ahead and move on to the back side of this one. It's important to understand that when we deal with percents, that a percent is just a ratio that compares a number to 100. So in this case, if we have 50%, it means that 50% is 50 out of 100. So it can be written as a fraction as 50 over 100. Percents are much easier to deal with out of 100. We just have to understand it as a comparison. So to simplify, we need to divide the numbers and we need to divide the numerator and the denominator by the greatest common factor, which in this case would be 50, because again, if we have 50%, it would be 50 out of 100, as it's shown right here. So if we simplify it with the greatest common factor of 50, and we divide 50 by 50, that gives us 1. 100 by 50 gives us 2. Let's take a look at the second example really quick. In a recent survey, 55% of cell phone owners said they text message. What fraction of cell phone owners is this? Well, again, we're dealing with 55%, so it's 55 out of 100. So we simplify it, and our greatest common factor would be, as it looks, 5. So we took 55 divided by 5, which is 11, and 100 divided by 5, which is 20. So 11 out of 20 of cell phones owners text message. Let's take a look at these. We have the percentage, but we need to see it out of 100. So really easily we can just write out of 100 and ignore that percent. So this one is a fairly easy one to work with, but we need to figure out first how we're going to figure out the greatest common factor. Well, we've got 75 and 100. If we use number sense in some of our prior knowledge, we should be able to tell that the greatest common factor is 25. So how many times do I take 25 to get 75? 3. And how many times do I take 25 to get 100? 4. So we come over here, and it's 3/4, or 3 over 4. Now let's take a look at this one, B. 90%. I love working with numbers that end in 0. So again, let's just do the same strategy out of 100. We'll ignore that percent. Well, in this case, all I have to do is take off our 0 because we know that that factor can be 10. So I'll take off a 0 and a 0, which leaves us with 9 over 10. Now in C, we've got a unique number, 38. So let's do what we did before. Out of 100, get rid of that percent. 38 over 100. Well, what's going to be a common factor? Let's just try 2 because they're both even, and we can work with those fairly easily. So what times 2 equals 38? 19. Then, what's half of 100? 50. So 19/50ths, or 19 over 50. And that is how we simplify these from percentages into the simplest form in a fraction. Before you guys work independently on the rest of this, I want to go over this last one here, which is fractions as percents. So we're going to flip it around and do the opposite. So to write a fraction as a percent, you have to find an equivalent ratio with 100 as a denominator. Well, let's look at this example for number 4. Write the fraction 6/8 as a percent. Well, as you can see here, we have this section shaded in, which represents 6/8. In other words, if we just look at the top row, we have 1, 2, 3 out of 4, which this is simplified, of course, by dividing by the greatest common factor of 2. So write equivalent ratios. One ratio is the fraction. The other ratio is the unknown value compared to 100. So we have to get that 3/4 into 100. Now, from the problems we've done previously, we know that 3/4 can be written easily out of 100 by multiplying by a factor of 25. So since 4 times 25 is 100, we have to multiply 3 by 25 to find the unknown value, which is, in this case, 75 over 100, or 75% of the rectangle is shaded. So this part here, 75% is shaded. Let's look at E. Write the fraction 9/12 as a percentage. Well, if we have 9 shaded in out of 12, it looks very similar to what's up here. Let's just look at that top. 1, 2, 3 out of 4. So, in this case, we once again have 3/4, and we can determine that by dividing this by a common factor of 3. So I'll take 9 divided by 3, which is 3, and 12 divided by 3, which is 4. Then we can use our previous knowledge, which we did up here. We can multiply these by 25 and get 75 over 100. So in this case, it'll be 75%.